there, and welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals. We're coming up right here at the end of the preseason. Next week is a game week. Really, they've already kind of closed down fall camp and started to prepare like it's a bye week for UNC next week. Before we get too far into it, I did want to let you guys know that we have one final promotion, probably for the year, this weekend on Rivals. So if you missed our promotion last week, which was, I believe, Go Cox 23 or whatever, make sure you take advantage of the promotion Kickoff 2023. So you go to the Insiders Forum or one of our premium articles, or just go to register. And whenever you check out, put in code Kickoff 2023, and you'll get 60% off for a whole year, which is pretty good. That's only running until Monday. And like I said, that'll be the last one of 2023 in general. So definitely get in on that. If you've been waiting on a promo, now is the time. We are on Instagram and the artist formerly known as Twitter, which I guess is X. We're on YouTube. We're on all the things. So make sure you follow us, subscribe, all that fun stuff. We are at Rivals Gamecock on all of our social media. So let's talk about recruiting just a little bit. Last week, we had kind of teased that Daniel Hill was set to announce this week. That didn't happen because the day before or 2 days before, I can't remember exactly what the date was now.
Day before,
day before, he tweeted out that he was going to push back his commitment. The little bit of digging I've done on that is that some people close to him have kind of said, wait and see how the season plays out a little before making that decision. I don't know that there's a particular record that he's looking at for South Carolina or anything. But yeah, he was mainly down to South Carolina and Alabama before this. I felt pretty good about South Carolina's chances had he announced on Wednesday. So obviously adding some more time into the mix, more things can happen. I think he's still probably considering both schools. I don't think that he's a lost cause or anything at this point, but you would have rather had that commitment on Wednesday than not, obviously. So we'll have to see how that plays out. He obviously has a lot more opportunity at South Carolina. There's a pretty gaping hole in the running back room right now, especially if you consider what you do have is mostly veterans that are leaving after this year. Alabama, meanwhile, I believe brought in a 5-star and 2 4-stars over the last couple of classes. So
sounds about right.
Opportunity-wise, definitely more South Carolina, but it's tough to turn down Bama. It's closer to his home. We'll have to see, kind of what he's prioritizing and what his family's prioritizing there. As far as I've heard, unlike many of the other sort of, I guess, last-minute disappointments that happened over the summer, this one is not so much tied to NIL. Hill doesn't seem as particularly motivated by that as maybe some of the ones over the summer. But, I mean, that always plays at least some level of factor nowadays as well. I'll have more on the weekly recruiting wrap-up tomorrow morning. If you'd like to read that, because it'll be a premium article, maybe use that promo code Kickoff 2023. And I know Alan's going to have a cool article
keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah.
Just say that for now.
Can we tease it in any way?
It's Shane Beamer related, and it's not really football related. We'll just run with that.
Perfect. And we've had a few fun one of those over the summer. We've already done a deep dive on Nick Gargiulo's
burgers,
eating exploits, Josh Simon's country boy persona. So yeah, we'll see what we have for Shane Beamer tomorrow. Anyway, let's get to some real football. It's time.
It's game week in a few programs. Not this one.
Yeah,
but
week 0. We're going to talk about some of those games here in a little bit. But Gamecocks had their second scrimmage of the preseason last weekend.
Saturday.
We did not. Yeah, last Saturday. We did not get immediate coverage with Beamer like we did after the first one. But throughout the week, we've kind of pieced together a lot of what happened, both unofficially and officially, I guess. If you want the official version, you can go to GamecockScoop.com and read what several of the coaches and players said over the course of the week about the scrimmage. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the other things that we've heard as well. I'll let you start. What did you hear about last weekend? How is the offense coming along? I guess if we could give an overall on the first scrimmage, maybe the defense slightly won. From what I've heard, it sounded like the offense kind of caught up a little bit in the second scrimmage, which I think is always a good sign if you have, kind of both showing that. But
it is a good sign you have both showing it. It's also the classic Jekyll and Hyde thing, the back and forth thing you always get in a scrimmage. Offense definitely a better showing second time around, moving the ball more controlled possessions, 2 double-digit play touchdown drives. That's actually what Shane Beamer said straight up. I believe it was an 18-play drive and a 14-play drive in there. Now, of course, your flip side of that is I was walking into availability on Wednesday, and obviously we can't watch practice, but I can hear it. Voices travel. And what is Shane Beamer talking about as we're walking by? Third downs with the defense. So can't get off the field there if you're giving up 18 and 14-play touchdown drives. But offense better, controlling the line of scrimmage more. That's something I've heard from people this week. I feel like they're probably closer at offensive line than maybe when we talked about this last week in terms of just knowing about those tackle spots. I think they're probably starting to hone in on who they want there. I know we were writing about that a little bit this week. I believe Steven Anderson did. That's kind of my main takeaway, is just that feels like it's going about the way it should for your offense, or maybe what you were hoping for a little bit earlier.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess 14 and 18 play drives at least implied that the defense wasn't giving up big plays.
Right. Well, that's true.
Which, I guess is still a positive, but it was a bugaboo last year getting off the field on the down. It's tough this time of year, right? Because every positive for the offense is a negative for the defense and vice versa. We're looking forward to seeing them play a real team that if every win is a win and there is no negative. So we'll get there pretty soon. I continue to hear good things about Spencer Rattler, him sort of picking up where he left off and running with it. Sounds like he and Dowell Loggins are working well together. Sounds like Loggins is kind of trusting Rattler's instincts on giving him a little bit more control of the offense. I think that's a good thing. It seems like, the more that things got simplified and put into the players' hands at the end of last season, it worked pretty well. So we'll see if that continues to be the case. Have we gotten any word on how quick they're planning to run? Because I know that we've seen through several sessions, they've run a good bit of hurry up. I've heard that perhaps in some of the scrimmages, they're running a good bit of hurry up. What are you hearing on that front?
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to run Tennessee's offense, but I do think the idea is a little bit quicker decisions, more fluid offense. That goes right back to what we've heard from people and what we've talked about in here about simple offense. We've heard a lot about Marcus Satterfield having too many play calls, too many packages. I think it was the Missouri game last year where Spencer kind of had a Freudian slip and said they didn't know what to do all the time after that loss. This is going to be a simpler, it sounds like, quicker decision. And yes, that means faster offense. But no, they're not going to snap the ball every 13 seconds, I don't think. So just don't expect that.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see the old Chip Kelly Oregon.
The Oregon offense, yeah, exactly.
But I do think streamlining some things. When you get a little bit of a rhythm going, you might see them go fast a few times.
Pick up a couple first downs and just keep it moving.
Exactly.
I will say, too, to that point, appreciate the comment there. We heard that 14-play drive was in a 2-minute situation per Beamer. So you're getting off. I know you're intentionally going no huddle in a 2-minute situation, but you're still getting off 14 plays in 2 minutes there for whatever you want to do with that. At least it happened once in a scrimmage.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty impressive. As far as the depth chart goes, you kind of hit on it, but seems like we're going to see Dakarian Joyner as the starting running back, Juju McDowell as the changeup back, Mario Anderson is going to get some play as well. Actually, I heard some good things about DJ Braswell finally this week. Yep. So it will be interesting to see how he factors in the game plan. Obviously, Spencer Rattler's locked in at quarterback. We did hear that Lenora Sellers potentially got a few snaps with the second team. We were talking about this a little bit beforehand. I still think Doty's your number 2 on the depth chart. If Rattler goes down with an injury, he's coming in immediately. But I do think it's definitely interesting that they're at least giving him some looks with some of the more veteran players. And yeah, I mean, it's really only upside for the future, I think. But
I'm asking the Tanner Bailey question more than the the Luke Doty question with that, just because we talked about this before. Tanner Bailey was a 4-star. He flipped from Oregon. He was traveling the end of last year. And also for depth chart purposes, you want to talk about travel. So Shane Beamer is back on Carolina Calls last night. He got a depth chart question from Todd Ellis, or maybe it was a caller. I can't remember. But either way, if you wanted to do some math or play a game in your head, he said 12 to 17 true freshmen are going to travel. And he said about half of them are going to play significant snaps. Just do some mental math, where those fit in. You're talking about 6 to 8 true freshmen playing big snaps against UNC is what he's implying there.
Yeah, and offensively, obviously, some of the biggest names there are Lenora Sellers, Nicholas Harbor, who is still a little banged up, and DJ Braswell. And we have some over-unders coming up a little bit later in the show that I think we might hit on a couple of those names just to see what sort of impact that they might make this season. Along the offensive line, things still shuffling around a lot. I feel like that we'll probably see 7 or 8 guys against UNC no matter what.
Does that throw Marquis Anderson or Tosin Babalade in there? For you talk about 6 to 8 true freshmen, I would assume they're both going to travel.
Yeah, I'm thinking that they're definitely traveling. I've also heard Trovon Ball's name a few times. I don't know that any of them are in that starting 5, but
I wouldn't think so.
Rotating in. We've heard good things about walk-on Jackson Hughes, who I think we've talked about the past few weeks, but I know he got some significant steps at left tackle in the scrimmage. Sidney Fugar continues to come up, looks faster, a little bit more defined, I guess, than when he arrived. One of the knocks that I guess internally we had whenever we saw Fugar got signed was that he had a little bit of bad weight on him. It seems like some of that's started to fall off. So, I mean, I don't know that you necessarily will – whoever starts the game in Charlotte, I don't know that that's necessarily the eventual starting 5.
But I think the second drive.
Yeah. Would you say probably won't be the same ones on the second drive?
I didn't say probably not, but I said it might not be. I mean, or even within that drive, you get into a 4th and 1 situation, you bring in a 6th offensive lineman. Who do you trust the most out of those guys? What do you trust? Like, there's all kinds of situations and permutations you can come up with for how 7, 8 offensive linemen get in that game, in any game this season, next Saturday night.
Defensively, we continue to talk about linebackers. I mean, it seems like Debo Williams has taken a step forward, really solidified his starting role. Stone Blanton's probably going to be the other starter, but then same thing. You're going to see Pup Howard as long as he's healthy. You're going to see Mo Kaba as he is coming back from that injury, probably on a limited basis at first, but then full go. I think you got a steady rotation of guys there that can all contribute.
Yeah, and again, it's linebacker. You can't play 2 linebackers a game for 70, 80 snaps against UNC's offense. That's just not going to happen, or any offense for that matter. And say the same about defensive tackle and edge rusher too. It's just nobody's playing all the snaps.
I guess one other thing that we have not mentioned yet today, since we last talked, Drew Tuazama, who we kind of have hinted at over the offseason. He needed to graduate. He graduated and then immediately is on campus at South Carolina. They say that he's going to be ready to go for the opening game. I don't know that that necessarily means he's a starter, but it wouldn't surprise me if he gets a couple of snaps. He is a 6'3", 275 edge rusher. He might be a little taller than that.
5 sacks at UAB last year.
Really came on strong at the end of the season for UAB. Has had kind of a twisted path. He went to Syracuse. Yeah, he went to Syracuse, then went to East Mississippi Community College, which is where Elijah Davis came from. That's how the connection, I think, was made with the program.
Yep.
And then, now he's here. So, well, I guess then UAB, and now he's here. Some other EMCC guys, several of the suspended players from South Carolina last season. We're thinking like Montague Rames, Anthony Rose, and
is it Upshaw?
I don't know if Upshaw ended up there. Zay Hardy, who had to be essentially gray shirted. For those of you that have been around recruiting a long time, if you remember that term, I don't think that is an official term anymore, but he's probably going to bounce there and then bounce back as long as he gets his grades in order. And it wouldn't surprise me if eventually we see Rames back. I don't know. I don't feel as confident about Rose, just because the charge was a little bit more severe against him, I guess. But we'll see. I think he had also gotten in trouble previous to that internally or whatever. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, South Carolina and EMCC seem to have a little bit of a relationship forming in that way. All right. Any other notes on that second scrimmage?
It's about what I had. You can check out some more stuff on the website, GamecockScoop.com, obviously, if you're subscribed. Or if you want to subscribe with the promo, I got some more scrimmage stuff there. Or go back to the first scrimmage or any of the practice reports.
Yeah. I guess one other just like highlight is in the absence of Antoine Wells, it sounds like Omega Blake has continued to make some plays and solidify his status on the 2 deep. Light seems to have come on for him. So will be interesting to see what sort of impact he makes this year. Let's get it. I mean, that's actually a good transition. Can we get into the injuries a little bit? What's the latest on that?
Latest on the injury front, Shane Beamer just said there's a whole lot of guys who are anywhere from questionable to probable, and he still anticipates all of them, except obviously Nichols and Brubaker, who are hurt going into camp. Playing next Saturday night, Juice Wells, Nick Harbor, Trey Knox. He said they're all expecting to play next Saturday night. Tyreek Johnson, same thing. He's been in a blue jersey the whole time we've had open practice. He didn't practice on Tuesday, but he said he was close to returning to practice. Juice Wells is doing more and more every day, and his practicing is what Shane Beamer said on Carolina Calls last night. It sounds like it's all Pup Howard was in a blue last time we saw him. Beamer said he's back and getting back to it. It seems like he is just trending where he needs to go, and as long as there's nothing crazy between now and next week, you should have pretty close to a full deck of cards to play with in Charlotte.
Yeah, and Beamer also gave us a little bit of insight on, I guess, the way that they construct camp. The first couple of weeks are a little bit more brutal as far as contact and everything goes, and then you lessen up as you get closer to actual gameplay, which makes sense. So you would think that any injuries from here to there are something freak, non-contact, or something that's going to happen in an actual game. So yeah, you sound like you're about as healthy as you can be. Obviously, there's always going to be something. But,
yeah.
All right, real quick, I wanted to do like just a fun little draft of our favorite things about football season. We are in week 0. It's right here. We've got preseason NFL football going on. Like it's right around the corner before it's going to be full blown for the next, 14, 15, however many weeks. So let's just go back and forth. We can each pick one at a time, and maybe later we'll tweet out our little drafts and see which one of us won. So you want to go first? What's your favorite thing about football season? First pick.
This is tough for me because there's just so much stuff. But the first thing I thought of is just the environments, the atmosphere, seeing full stadiums. Whether that's Charlotte next week, that's Sandstorm, that's going to Rocky Top this year, going to College Station, just the general, there's 100,000, there's 80,000 people coming to a small college town to make an environment somewhere. I love that.
Yeah, I definitely think you can't beat that. That's specifically if you're talking about college football, that's what it's all about. There was really, very few moments in my life that exceeded the like mid fourth quarter sandstorm against Tennessee last year. Yeah, no, that was insane. That's a good one. All right, so number one pick, atmospheres at stadiums. My number one pick, I'm gonna go generic here, but I think it's something that pretty much everyone can get behind. I'm gonna go with the weather. I love the transition into fall. Waking up on a crisp fall day, knowing that you got a full day of football ahead of you. There's really nothing better than that. So I got weather as my number one pick. What's your number two pick?
It was 105 degrees when I got my car coming out of availability yesterday. No argument here about weather being the top pick. No, my second one is late night football, whether that's Hawaii, whether that's Pac-12 After Dark, rest in peace, whether that's a Friday night game, a MAC game in the middle of the week. Just sometimes those get weird, those get chaotic. You've got a 35 to 34 game at 1 a.m. and you're still watching live football, especially college football. I don't like covering those as much, but if there's a day game for South Carolina and I'm at home, I really love just the late night stuff.
Yeah, I actually kind of miss that about living on the East Coast because obviously I'm on Mountain Time now, so they're not quite as late. But I remember very many times in my 20s being like out at a bar after the Carolina game's over or whatever, and there's still football on the TV at like midnight, 1 a.m. whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, you see some crazy stuff. I remember, man, it was like BYU and Nebraska maybe or something, but I have a very distinct memory of them like throwing a Hail Mary at the end of the game, winning while we're just all kind of hanging out. Of course, yeah, I mean you're already in a good mood at that point, so anything that happens is just magnified. I guess I'm going to step a little bit away from college specifically here, but football season. I love fantasy football. I feel like that's one of the things that I look forward to most throughout the year. I have a group that I've been playing with for 8 or 9 years, people from my hometown, and that's like pretty much the only time I even talk to them. So cool way to kind of stay in touch there. And we end up doing like really silly stuff to figure out draft order. Like next week we're doing we're calling it a 40 by 40. So you have to chug a 40 while completing a 40-yard dash, or like the time starts when you start one or the other, and that's how we're gonna figure out draft order. So everyone wish me luck that I don't die.
I might be doing the podcast alone next week after UNC.
yeah, exactly. It's that Sunday, so our final podcast might be that Sunday morning reviewing UNC.
Furman week, I'm just on my own. Jeez. 40 by 40, man. It's never happened in just random order. Just like hit a random draw button, pull names out of a hat.
The thing is, I'm one of the better in shape of the crew, so I'm actually legitimately worried about some hospitalizations for some of the other guys. We'll see how it goes. All right, number 3 for you.
Rivalry games, whether that's South Carolina Clemson, whether that's an NFL rivalry game, one of those big ones. We're losing some this year, unfortunately, with the Pac-12 breaking up and stuff. But I don't know. It's just nice when you see Michigan and Michigan State absolutely hating each other's guts. Maybe that got that was a bad example last year with the tunnel fight. But still, the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving, I love that. It's one of my favorite college football traditions. Sometimes you get the early season rivalry games like, Iowa and Iowa State played week 2, week 3. Just rivalry games in general. I just love those.
I'm going to go a similar direction, but they aren't necessarily always tied to a rivalry or something, but just the random upsets in college football. And for some reason, they seem to come on like a certain weekend. You just have a weekend that has like weird energy. I mean, including the South Carolina Tennessee weekend last year. I can't even remember what all happened.
It was like Maryland was hanging with Ohio State. Yeah. Illinois or Michigan needed a last second field goal to beat Illinois. We were talking about that. Like, it's one of those Saturdays. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and someone else got knocked off in the top group that weekend too.
Yeah.
Maybe TCU was playing Baylor or something. I don't know. I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was just a weird feeling in the air, and it ended up kind of coming to fruition that evening. So yeah, the random upsets, and especially when like a weekend that you think is not actually going to be that exciting of a weekend just gets like some weird juju and goes off the rails.
I believe the shutdown fullcast term for that is a blood week. What you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. All right, final pick for each of us. What's your number 4 favorite thing about football season?
I love it when, I guess this kind of applies to all sports, but just something about in football when a player comes out of nowhere, and really college football. I mean, I'm thinking Mickey Manori right now. I mean, none of us were really had him on the radar going into last year. Then first drive of the season, he makes a 4th down stop. I don't, like Joe Burrow, we knew who he was. We knew he was an Ohio State transfer. He'd never played great, and then he puts up the best season in college football history for a quarterback. And then a Western Kentucky quarterback most of us hadn't heard of ends up breaking Burrow's records. Just players you haven't heard of doing crazy things feels like a very uniquely college football thing.
I'll put that down as emergence of new players.
It's kind of hard to phrase that, but you know the kind of thing I'm talking about.
No, definitely.
That's junior college transfer comes to Auburn and Cam Newton and goes 13-0.
Mine's a little bit more general fall, I guess, but I think that this is something that you can now enjoy at all college football stadiums. I think all college football stadiums, definitely in the SEC when you used to not be able to. I like fall beer.
Yeah.
Give me a nice like amber ale. I don't necessarily need like a full on like super sugary pumpkin thing with cinnamon on it or anything. But I like a nice like red ale or like an amber ale or something that just feels fall. Reminds me of like pumpkin patches or something, but not specifically pumpkin.
You were thinking more like fall. I was thinking just things I like in football, but either way, it all ties together. I'm glad we're back.
I'll find a way to reword mine to make sure that they at least sound all college football-y.
Sure.
Before I tweet those out, but yeah, point being, there's plenty to look forward to in the coming weeks, and we are going to talk you through all of it, including the newest fall beer, maybe. I don't know. I mean, that would be great if any brewery wants to
sponsor the Gamecocks podcast.
I'm down.
Yes.
All right. So last season, this was my favorite episode, I think, or up there, because we got to put our name on paper for some over-unders, several of which I think we actually did a pretty good job of hitting. I didn't go back and pull those. I should have, but I don't know. You can go back and listen last August around this time. I know at the very least we hit on special team stuff. We hit on some Spencer Rattler things that didn't come to fruition at first.
No, they didn't.
They kind of got close.
I think we had a touchdown number at like 20 or 25. It ended up at 18, and that was with 10 in the last 3 games.
Yeah, it definitely looked doomed mid-season, and then we got a little bit more respectable by the end. So yeah, let's go back and do some over-unders. The way that we're going to do it, we have 7 or 8 of them picked out. We'll go back and forth picking the line for the over-under, and then the other can kind of justify which way they want to go on that. So I'll start with the win total. I guess I could have just gone with Vegas. I think that they have it set at like 6.5, which felt, I guess, kind of pretty close. But since we all picked South Carolina to win 8 games in our way too early preview or whatever at the end of July, I figured I would set the win total at 7. So do you see South Carolina going over or under 7 wins? Can't pick exactly on the money there.
Why didn't you? Because I know I had 8-4 in July, but I'm kind of a little bit back to 7-5 now. Just kind of seeing how some other camps have gone and just kind of thinking about the schedule a little bit more. So if I do think they're going to go 7-5, like that's what I put my name to now. So you're just asking, like, would it be more likely if they got to 6 or lower, or 8 or higher?
Yeah,
even though I don't
pretty
think
much.
either of those is going to happen. Yeah. That's tough. I think if they can't win 7 games, I guess I'll just stick with what I said in July and say 8's more likely than 6. Just because they got to 8 last year, I do think there is something to be said about this team playing better at the end of the year than the beginning of the year. Both of Beamer's 2 years here. The schedule gives you a nice home stretch there to end. That's tough, but I think 8's more likely than 6, so I'll go with that.
Hey, you're telling me I put the number at the right place then?
Yeah, that's yes.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think 8 is more likely than 6, but 8 is going to be tough. I mean, it's we've talked about it throughout the offseason. It's going to be so essential to win against North Carolina and against Mississippi State and Furman. Obviously, if you can go 3-2 in those first 5 games, all the doors are open.
Yep.
If you don't, then things get a lot more sketchy.
Yeah, so we're going to go on to some player props now. We're going to start with, I think, what a lot of people would say is maybe the most important thing this year. Spencer Rattler passing yards per game. He was at 232.8 last year, but it got to 260 in the second half of the season. Obviously, with some Tennessee, Clemson, 400-yard outbursts mixed in there. I set this at 249.5, so I'm asking if he can improve his number by almost 20 yards per game this year. And you got to remember, too, this goes for all of our offensive props, there's going to be less snaps this season. The clock's going to run after first downs, except the last 2 minutes of the half. That's going to shorten time, excuse me. Not just for South Carolina, for everybody, but, a 10-play drive that would have taken 5 minutes is going to take 6 or 7 minutes now, just the way it's going to work. So there's going to be less possession. So 249, can Spencer Rattler average 250 passing yards per game this season?
Yeah, I'm just trying to look at what the average yards per game for some of the top quarterbacks was last year and try to kind of think
Rattler
about that.
Was 36th in the country. I believe 250 would put him up to 23rd on last year's number is what I had. So you're asking him to basically be a top 20 yard just by yards quarterback in the country.
Okay, let me give you a couple of names from 2022 just as comparison, then I'll answer the question. So we're looking at Michael Penix Jr. He averaged 357 yards a game. Caleb Williams averaged 324 yards a game.
Yep.
Drake May, week 1 opponent, 308 yards per game.
Mm-hmm.
Stetson Bennett, 256.2 yards per game. So that's kind of getting in that range that we're talking about. Sam Hartman at Wake Forest was over 300 yards per game. Yeah. So I think that's a good over-under. I'm going to pick the over because I think if South Carolina is going to have success, it's going to have to be over because we've talked about the run game and I don't know, if the offense is set up the way that I tend to think that it is, which is this more loose gunslinger mentality, let Rattler cook sort of ideology, then I think he's going to get plenty of opportunities. And if he follows through with it the way that it sounds like, at least, every indication since last November, he has been, I think he exceeds that. So I actually would probably say he's going to be somewhere in the 270.
Okay. Wow. You're way over. Okay. Where would that, if you sold the page open, where would 270 put him on last year's list in the country? Probably it's got to be pushing top 15.
I did close it, but I can pull it right back up. It won't take.
I'm just more wondering, what does that actually mean in terms of a national quarterback or, for his sake, getting into an NFL draft discussion if he's going to average 270 plus a game this year?
So if I filter by passing yards per game from last season, 270, let's just put that as the line. That would have put him right around the Bo Nix territory, which was 276. Bryce Young was 277. So if I'm actually counting up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, probably 20-ish.
Yeah, so that's about, you're pushing top 20, top 15 quarterback there, which I definitely think can happen. But that is going to take a jump from, you can't have I think it was 6 games under 200 last year. That's half your schedule. Obviously, if that happens again, A, the prop's dead, and B, this team probably isn't going to get where it wants to go.
Well, the narrative of 2020-22 was so tough, right? Because you came out kind of letting him throw it all over, and that wasn't working.
And then you ran it with Marshawn a lot. Yeah.
and then you won several games by playing ball control and getting enough on the ground to make it work and kind of taking it out of his hands. But then when you played those sort of upper echelon opponents at the end of the year, we saw that you needed him to kind of be unleashed. And I think you just got to ride or die with that mentality this year.
Especially week 1, too.
Oh, totally. All right. Next one is turnovers, which is an issue that has been harped about a lot this offseason. Obviously, I believe they were last in the SEC both of the last 2 years, or
27 turnovers last season in 13 games.
Yeah, so you had 13 lost fumbles, 14 interceptions for 27 total, and you had 27 total fumbles. So you got 14 of them back.
You're putting the ball on the ground twice a game, which is hard to even believe. But
so we're looking at 27 total. I think that they've made a huge, emphasis on it. So I'm going to set the over-under at 20. Do you think that they get it down to 20, or we see more of the same and they're in the bottom of the SEC once again on that?
I'm going to say they get it down to 20 just because I do believe a lot of turnovers are luck. I do believe that ball bounces, tip. Remember, Spencer Rattler did throw 12 picks last year, but he also had a handful of tipped interceptions. I'm thinking of 2 against South Carolina State off the top of my head. There was a tipped interception against Florida too. And I don't think 20 is some outrageous number because even if you have 20 turnovers, that still means you're turning it over more than once a game, and that's still not good. But if you're just talking about making incremental improvement, adding, I guess that's 7 extra possessions to your season, I almost think they have to hit that, or this is not going to go the way you want it to again if you're a South Carolina fan.
So you're going with the under?
Yeah.
The real ideal, right? Because luckily for South Carolina, at least they've been really good defensively, forcing turnovers as well. The real ideal is that you somehow keep that up and get that number a little lower, and then you really start to see that impact several games, I think, this season. But all right, so you got the under 20 turnovers.
You can't turn the ball over 20 times 3 years in a row. Come on now.
I hope that you are right.
So we're going to go to another thing that was a big issue each of the first 2 years of the Shane Beamer era. That's been stopping the run. It's been a problem. We saw in the bowl game, especially Notre Dame ran for 263. Clemson ran for 237 last year, even in a game that you won. Obviously, Florida and Arkansas both torched you for over 300 yards each. To get in the top 100 nationally and top 10 in the SEC, which again is not some earth-shattering number, but they were 13th in the SEC last year and I believe 117th in the country. You would have to drop from getting up 192.4 yards last year to 170.5 to get the top 100 nationally. Can they cut 20 yards off their opponent's rushing per game this season?
All right, so just to give people context again, I'm looking at the 2022 numbers. This is from teamrankings.com, so I don't know how accurate or whatever it is. You said 170?
Yes, that would put them, I believe that would put them 10th in the SEC, which was what I was looking at earlier. 170.5. Okay. So
here's some names that you're like kind of shooting for. North Carolina last year, it says gave up 173.6. Yep. Ole Miss 173.5, Vanderbilt 172.5, bunch of G5 schools. I'm trying to think of like some Miami 147. I mean, that's really low. I think I'm going to go over. I think that they improve. I don't know that they improve that
20 yards.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if we're maybe in the 180s or so. Maybe I would say something like 185, but I don't know that they're going to improve quite that much. You're still replacing Jordan Burch and Gilbert Edmond. I do think we feel better about that than we did in the spring. Now that you have JT Gear, you have Drew Tuazama, and then you have all the guys that you had coming back. Some of the people that you're maybe going to shuffle from inside to out. Donovan Westmoreland, who seems like he's kind of made a permanent move to edge. But yeah, I still think that they're probably going to have some trouble, at least early in the season, containing the edge. And you just play against some teams that can really run the ball very well. Georgia is going to run the ball well. Mississippi State's going to run the ball well. North Carolina's got two pretty good running backs. I mean, I know Drake May is the headline there, but they're no slouch there either.
Nope.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough to get down to that number that you said, 175 or
170. So the two reasons for optimism here, I think, if you're South Carolina, would be, well, I guess three. A, you're more experienced in the defense. You've got, Clayton White's talked a lot about linebackers and corners having to help and stop the run. All right, well, you think you're better there. Two would be the clock thing again. If teams are going to be running the ball, they're not going to get as many plays because the clock's going to keep going even when they do pick up first downs. And you're not facing as many running quarterbacks this year. You don't have KJ Jefferson on the schedule. You don't have an Anthony Richardson on the schedule. Connor Wegman at A&M is not as mobile as Haynes King was, I don't think. Questions still to be had about Carson Beck or whatever at Georgia. But you don't have that. You don't have an obvious. Last year you played two very obvious rushing quarterbacks in Jefferson and Richardson. Those were, not surprisingly, your two worst games of the season, stopping the run. And you don't have those this year on the schedule. So maybe that plays into it. Maybe it doesn't. But it's got to be better either way.
We have talked about that we expect the linebacker play overall to be better or at least more talented. We'll see how much of the mental aspect of just getting people acclimated or whatever to being full-time starters makes a difference there. But I could see a path, but it's going to be tough. And I do think that that's a key. But also you're just going to have to be opportunistic on defense. I still think you're going to give up a decent amount of yards this year, but you're going to have to bend and not break, force some turnovers, all those sorts of things.
It's kind of I'm thinking about the Kentucky game last year. Chris Rodriguez got his yards, like he did, and Devin Achane the next week against A&M. They both had pretty good rushing totals, but Rodriguez didn't score, and I think Achane only did it once. So yards ain't points.
All right, let's move on to a fun player prop. So Kai Kroger in 2021 threw 1 passing touchdown. In 2022 threw 2 passing touchdowns. In 2023, is he going to throw 3? No, I'm not going to set the line high. I set the line for Kai Kroger passing touchdowns at 1.5. So I'm going to make you have to go one direction or the other there.
I'll take the over there. I think he can throw 2. I don't think that's a crazy ask. I still think he's going to be a part of this. It's Pete Lembo. Like, we're still talking about a guy who wants to draw things up on special teams, a unit that's been very good at doing that. We know he has the arm, obviously. I don't think 2 touchdowns and what you're expecting to be a 13-game season is crazy.
I think it might be a little tougher just because there's so much of it on tape now that people might be a little bit looking for it more. But you would have thought that by Notre Dame last year, and
even
that one in the bowl game.
I'm thinking about the Florida one. They were down 24-0. It was 4th and 7. They weren't in field goal range. That's a pretty obvious. We can't punt the ball back, but also we can't kick a field goal thing. And Florida was not. They called a timeout. Billy Napier did, and they still weren't ready for a fake coming out of the timeout. And yet a wide open man scored. So we keep saying teams are going to expect it. And then you look at Florida, you look at the bowl game, you had a wide open man in the end zone. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, we know that both Beamer and Lembo like to put their finger on the scale in special teams to try to make something happen. They're not going to just sit there and let a team beat them without at least pulling a couple tricks out, which I appreciate, especially after sitting through the Will Muschamp era. I very much appreciate. All right, what we got next? I think that this one's kind of weird but fun.
Yeah, you put this on here for me to make a line, and I wasn't really sure where to go with it. But you have written here broadcast mentions for Nick Harbor and Lenora Sellers before they get a yard gained. I set this at 2.5 for Harbor and 1.5 for Sellers, just because I don't really know where to go with that. Because Harbor, we're still thinking is going to be in Charlotte and have a chance to play week 1. Maybe if he's not in by halftime, the 5-star Nick Harbor, probably get one early. They recruited the 5-star Nick Harbor, and then a second one maybe if he hasn't been involved yet, and then maybe you're just asking about a third. And Sellers, maybe he comes up once, but he's still at this point QB3, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of broadcast attention on that. But also, if you're trying to play this out multiple weeks, like that's, I don't know, are the ESPN Plus broadcasters at South Carolina Furman going to have a lot to say about, I don't know, Lenora Sellers? Like, this was kind of your idea. I'll let you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the rationale here was, do you think either gets a yard in week 1? Because it wouldn't surprise me if either is brought up in week 1.
I think Harbor does. I think he'll get a touch and end around a Jets. We talked with someone this week about the reverse last year that Jalen Brooks ran a lot that worked really well. Iced the game at Kentucky on a touchdown with that. Ran it against Clemson. Ran it against Tennessee. Is that the Nick Harbor play? Just because you get him not so much running routes, having to beat corners, just his straight line speed. Like I could see that happening. And if that's a touch, then here you go.
And to answer your question about why would Sellers be brought up as the third string quarterback, is it possible that they have a package for him?
Yeah, maybe. No, it's a fun prop. I think Harbor's more likely than Sellers just because A, he's the 5-star, and B, he's more likely to actually get a touch next Saturday, which is why his line is higher. But yeah, I'll say 2.5 for Harbor, 1.5 for Sellers. If you want to take sides there.
Assuming Harbor's fully healthy, which is hard to assume. Let's say he's fully healthy going into the game. I think 2 is probably about right. So I guess I'll take under. Because like you said, I do think probably at some point in the first half, they try to get the ball in his hands. The first time he's out on the field, it won't surprise me if the broadcast points to him and says, hey, there's that 5-star.
We know he's working on punt block too.
Yeah. If
that happens, you got to force a punt from Drake May for that to happen. But
yeah. So, and it's ESPN, so they can talk about any other outlet or whatever. So maybe someone brings up Feldman's freak list that he was number 1 on it, or whatever. I tend to think that we're going to see Sellers in the first game at like some sort of package, something. So would you say 1.5?
Yeah. Will his name be said twice before he gets a yard?
I don't think they'll bring him up until he's in. And then I think if he's in, it's probably he's doing some sort of keeper or something.
Taking 2 unders there.
So yeah, 2 unders. But I think probably both have something on the stat sheet by the end of the North Carolina game, assuming everyone's healthy.
I think we have 3 more here.
I have 2 more, but
we're going to do another thing at the end too. But
okay. Oh yeah. So
2 more over unders and then one other thing. But
the over under that I have next is for the leading rushers yards. I'm also interested in who you think the leading rusher is going to be.
Yep.
But so last year, Marshawn Lloyd was the Gamecocks' leading rusher. He had 621 yards, which is actually a little bit lower than I thought it was. 621 yards on 111 carries. I guess he did miss some time, especially at the end of the season. But now Lloyd's former 5-star traditional running back. We know that they don't necessarily have that in the backfield this year. So I set the over-under at 615 yards for the leading rusher, assuming someone stays healthy all year. Do we think anyone reaches that 615-yard threshold?
I'm going to say no. I think this is going to be too much of a committee situation between Joyner, Braswell, McDowell, and Anderson. 615, you're talking about like 50-ish a game in a 12-game regular season plus a bowl game. You'd like someone to get there, and you'd like to think that maybe you put up someone goes for a buck whatever against Furman or Jack State, and that skews the average. But I'm still thinking no. You're facing some pretty good run defenses. You're going to spread your running. You're going to spread your carries a lot, and you're going to be throwing the ball a lot more than you're running it. I think that's just straight up. So I'm going to say under on that.
Yeah, I mean, you may skew 200 rushing yards against Furman and Jacksonville State or whatever, but you're also probably going to skew like 30 rushing yards against Georgia. So, okay. So under, do you think that Dak Joyner is your leading rusher at the end of the season?
I do. I think there's just too many different ways that you can run the ball, whether that's a traditional handoff, whether that's an end around, whether that's direct snaps. I think he gives you more experience with other backs. We know he's RB1 now, and I think there's more ways you can use him than maybe a McDowell or an Anderson or a Braswell at this point.
I think just to be contrary, I might take the over. Honestly, because I was going to take the under 2, but then when you broke it down as 50 yards a game, I think if he stays healthy, he could average 50 yards a game. Yeah. I think it'd be like really close though to that 600.
It's a good line. And then the last number we have here, I just took the leading wide receiver, and again, curious who you think that is. I made this really simple. Juice Wells led you receiving yards last year at 928. Obviously, he's back. There's a lot of competition at wide receiver, but the line 999.5. Will they have their first 1,000-yard receiver since Pharaoh Cooper in 2014? It's pretty straightforward, but that's where I'm putting the leading receiver.
Man, I really hope that he gets back to full strength soon, because that was something that I was targeting this season as something that I thought really had a good chance of happening. I guess I can't hedge my bet, but I will say if he plays the full season and is healthy, I do think he reaches that number. But because I don't think he's going to play the full season completely healthy, I think he's going to be a little bit slow getting going in these first couple of weeks. He doesn't quite get there.
Okay. And this isn't on the sheet, but I think we both agree that Wells is the number one receiver. He's going to lead the team in yards. Who's second? Yeah. Who is the second most receiving yards this year, you think? I'm thinking Trey Knox. That would be mine.
Yeah, Trey Knox or Josh Simon. It won't surprise me, given everything I've heard about Omega Blake, if he gets 200-300. I think Xavier Legette's going to be in the conversation for second leading receiver as well. I mean, he had a really strong bowl game. We've seen him flash if he can put it all together for a full season, especially if Wells starts off a little slow. Maybe he's your second leading receiver.
Yeah, I still think there's the juice scenario where even if he does start slow, you're facing some pretty bad secondaries. Vanderbilt's secondary is not good. Jack State. We don't know how good Tennessee's is going to be that year into week 5 at that point.
North Carolina's is not good.
That's the week 1 question, if he's going to be fully healthy. But I do think there is still a way he could just go for like 220 in a game, 190 in a game. I think he had 170 in Arkansas last year early. Having that type of game to put him back on pace, even if he doesn't fully start the season healthy. Bold predictions? You got one? You got a bold take about 2023 South Carolina football?
Bold prediction. Let me let you go first,
okay.
And then I'll share mine. You said the yours was out there, and I can't wait.
I don't know how out there this is after I thought about it, but I'm saying that Lenora Sellers will start South Carolina's bowl game. I think Rattler's going to be doing NFL draft prep. I think the staff looks at that and goes, maybe, we love Luke Doty, but we see we have going into 24. Let Lenora face a real defense. So I can't tell if that's like very normal and rationalized or, oh my God, you're picking QB3 to start the bowl game. But I think there's at least logic to it. I'm going to say Lenora Sellers is starting South Carolina's bowl game at quarterback.
Okay. I like it. That's also
obviously depending on Rattler opting out for the draft, because obviously if he's playing, he's going to start. But
which I think that part's less bold, but then it's also a clear signal at that point to Doty that they think Sellers is the future. So then where does that put Doty? We did hear that maybe he's run a little bit at receiver. Would he stick around and try to make a transition to a new position? Would he go try to start a couple years at another school? I don't know. There's that creates a lot of questions that I guess would be answered sooner in the offseason than if you tried to carry that battle into spring.
Well, you could also answer some of them, one game sample, but watching Lenora Sellers play a whole game against at least a bowl caliber opponent.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, I would like to see it, but we'll see.
I think that's bold. I think that qualifies as bold.
Yeah, definitely.
What you got?
All right. I kind of did this last year, and it ended up coming to fruition, but I'll add another team in this year. So last year I said they were going to beat either Georgia or Clemson. I say this year they're going to beat either Georgia, Tennessee, or Clemson. They get one of those games this year.
Okay. You got 2 of those 3 on the road. That's bold enough. It's 2 of those 3 early when you're sort of figuring things out. I can get with that. That's just the right amount of bold, but also I wouldn't be that surprised.
Well, I mean, depending on which one it is, you start to talk about mindset and momentum and all these things too, right? Like if you somehow came out of
one of the first 2.
yeah, if you win one of those first two and come out of that 5-game stretch 4-1, you have everyone's attention in the country. If it's the Clemson game, I mean, it will still very much matter as far as the trajectory of the two programs and all that sort of stuff. But probably by that point, you're more like that's your 8th win or whatever, you know.
Yeah. I'm good with that. I mean, it's your pick, you whoever you want, but I think that's about right. I don't think there's a way they're going to beat Georgia. I'm just not there, but throw them in there. Give yourself a puncher's chance, and then you talk about the trip to Knoxville and the home game against Clemson. And if you do scalp one of those games, I think you're feeling pretty good about hitting your 7 or maybe your 8.
Yeah, I mean, if you get one of those games, one of those early games, then I think 7 would be a disappointment at that point.
For sure. As if assuming you take care of business against Furman, maybe you beat Mississippi State at home. Yeah, and then the last thing we had here was week 0. Want to talk about some actual football Saturday? I think we got 7
we have
FBS games.
We have some real football playing. You might have to help me with the 7th game. I believe it is. Oh man, who is even playing? Ohio? No, I have that one. I'll just give you the 6. Maybe it'll come naturally. So I put in a parlay earlier this week. So some of these lines might have changed a little bit, but I'll kind of tell you what the line was when I said it, and you can tell me if I'm dumb or not. So I did a 6-pick parlay. The first game.
So you have every game on the board except one.
I have every game on the board except for one. I guess I didn't feel confident about whatever that one was.
Okay.
So the first game that I picked was San Diego State and Ohio. The line that I picked on was San Diego State minus 3.5. That is Ohio at San Diego State. So you got some jet lag factor there. That's the 7 p.m. Eastern
Fox
game.
Sports 1. Yeah, I'm looking at the schedule now.
So, I mean, I don't know if you've kept up with either of those teams. How are you feeling about San Diego State minus 3.5?
I know Ohio was pretty good last year. They were up in the MAC. They got their quarterback back. I think Rourke is his name.
Yep.
I kind of lean Ohio there. I think the offense is better, but also I think San Diego State's probably the more talented. Well, they are the more talented team. You should look at recruiting ratings and stuff. I think that's one of the closer games of week 1, or I guess this is week 0. But yeah, I lean Ohio there just with points, but I think week 0 is always such a crapshoot.
I mean, I picked San Diego State to cover, but then afterwards kind of regretted it as I looked a little bit more into it. But I agree with your breakdown. I think probably San Diego State, the more complete team. Ohio has the best quarterback.
Yeah,
exactly. So we'll see how that plays out. Hopefully, the fact that it's at San Diego State helps me out a little bit there too.
It's not a bad week 0 game. It's 2 pretty good G5 programs.
Yeah. Then we got Vanderbilt rematching Hawaii. So Hawaii's traveling to Vanderbilt. If you remember last year, Vanderbilt went to Hawaii and just beat the brakes off of them. It was like 63-10, I believe. Vanderbilt is favored to win by 17, or at least they were whenever I put in this bet. That's Saturday at 7:30.
First SEC game, or not SEC game, but SEC involved game of the year. We've got staff picks coming out later in the week, and you can see what I did and everything. But I'm with Vanderbilt here. I actually think Vanderbilt can get to a bowl game this year. They won 5 last year. I don't think them winning 1 more is that much of a stretch. They've got their quarterback back. They got a pretty good front 7 again. Clark Lee's a linebackers guy. Hawaii's still in a total rebuild off the Todd Graham thing. I think they went 3 wins last year. I think Vanderbilt covers 17 here.
Yeah, I mean, Vanderbilt put 63 on them last year, and I think this Vanderbilt team is better than that one. 17 feels kind of safe, but it also makes me suspicious. So
we'll 3 possessions, but I think Vanderbilt's just a lot better.
Another tough one to call, and one that I think is basically a pick 'em at this point. UTEP is a 1-point favorite against Jacksonville State at Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State, of course, is their first year at the FBS level. The other Gamecocks
coming to Williams-Brice Stadium November 4th.
Yeah, so we'll get a little preview of that one as well. But how are you feeling about that one?
I actually don't remember what I put on the sheet. I think I put UTEP on the sheet for the website this week, but UTEP wasn't a bad team last year. I mean, that was another total rebuild situation there, but they put it together last season a little bit. I think they win 5 games last year. Did they get to a bowl game? Do you
They
know off the top of
didn't,
your
but
head?
they made a bowl in 2021, and
In
then I think
21,
they
okay.
won 5 last year. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
which 5,
they're
6
borderline. Yeah,
at UTEP is still better than it's been there in a while. I always question teams coming up that first year transition. You know, you're adding 22 scholarships to the roster, whatever that looks like. I picked UTEP, but it's a coin flip. I mean, I think I picked UTEP at least.
I just went with my gut here. I got the Gamecocks on the shirt. Got to go with the other Gamecocks. So I picked Jacksonville State to cover +1. It's at home, but I agree with you. The fact that they're stepping up a level, I'm interested to see if their lines of scrimmage hold up against a
kind of what I'm thinking too.
Power 5 a little bit longer, but
that game's at 5:30, by the way, CBS Sports Network Eastern Time.
Yep. And then probably, I guess, the biggest marquee sort of matchup, although it shouldn't really be much of a contest. Navy at Notre Dame in Dublin. That's at 2:30 Eastern. And Notre Dame, I have them favored at 20.5, although I think that line's moved a little bit since then. But yeah, who are you picking there?
And it's got more to do with Navy being a first-year head coach after a long time with Kendi and Montalolo. They're in a major transition. I don't know how good Notre Dame is yet. I think they have a potential to be very good if Sam Hartman is Wake Forest Sam Hartman. But for now, I'll just take a team with a first-year head coach going overseas to not cover against one of the more talented teams. I'll just pick Notre Dame. It just feels safer.
Yeah. See, I picked Navy to cover, but mostly because 20.5 feels high when you're playing against a triple option team, particularly.
That's true. And you're right, getting a new quarterback, you're still figuring things out on offense. Yeah,
I don't even think they have.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't even think they have to score a ton, and I think Notre Dame will look like they dominated them, and it still might not quite get to that 20.5 just because of time.
Notre Dame grinds them out like 28-10, and it never feels close, but also they still don't cover the 20 kind of deal.
Yes, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I can see
that. So, then we have New Mexico State and UMass. New Mexico State is favored in that one -7.5, or at least they were when I picked it. UMass was literally the worst team in college football last year. New Mexico State's been fine. They were another borderline bowl team last year. 7.5 felt pretty safe to me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'm taking New Mexico State there. UMass is just a mess, and it's a cross-country trip. And they did get to a bowl game last year, by the way. New Mexico State went 6-6, so take them there.
I believe UMass did bring their head coach back from like 20.
Don Brown, yeah, he's the head coach
era, whatever it was.
The former Michigan defensive coordinator. Yeah. Also, their quarterback. Do you know who UMass's starting quarterback is?
I don't
know how to say his name. He's the former Clemson backup to Trevor, Taysom Pombenet. You know who I'm talking about?
No.
What? He was Trevor's backup at Clemson for a little bit, and then he bounced to somewhere else, and now he's at UMass.
Okay.
There's a few of those this year. Casey Thompson, the former Texas quarterback, at Florida Atlantic starting. JT Daniels of Georgia and USC fame is at Rice now. It's been an interesting little quarterback carousel here.
Yeah, it's it's tough out there. I'm pretty sure we'll have to talk in the coming seasons about where all these 4 stars that South Carolina is collecting are going to end up as well. So, all right, and then the last one I have, and then you can try to figure out which one I missed. USC is -30.5 against San Jose State. That game is at USC. That'll be 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Local time for those guys.
I'm taking the Heisman Trophy winner who's going to want to put up points early to make a statement against a 7-win Mountain West team. San Jose State's fine. They went to the bowl last year, but we're talking about a team that's trying to win the national title here. It's going to want to come out and show it early.
Yeah, I would probably have picked USC minus whatever. I do have concerns about USC's defense, and if San Jose can score enough points to like keep it at like 25.
It's a lot of points. I mean, you're talking about over 4 touchdowns, but
so that's my big concern there. But we'll see if I hit that parlay. I put $20 on it to win 1,000. So
there you go. We can get a brewery to sponsor us.
That's right.
The game you have
maybe,
missing here.
Maybe I change careers if I start hitting some of these parlays. What
I've
game do I have?
got Florida International at Louisiana Tech at 9:00 Eastern on CBS Sports Network. That's Louisiana Tech minus 11.5 is the number here. I know FIU was very bad last year, and Louisiana Tech's at home, so I guess I'll just run with that. But that's a pretty forgettable. Of all the games here, that's the most forgettable. I guess Louisiana Tech was a 3-win team last year too. So although they did lose 2 games in overtime.
I think that's why I didn't choose it. I didn't know what to do with that one.
It's also the last game too.
About them.
That's your name recognition. Late night football. Just watching Louisiana Tech and FIU at like midnight. It's a 9:00 kick.
So next week we'll be back on Thursday to preview North Carolina. We will have plenty of coverage of the week ahead on GamecockScoop.com. Next week will be the last time that we only do 1 podcast a week. Then we'll start doing 2 podcasts a week to review games, preview games, all throughout the season. Don't forget to hop on that promo. So use promo code Kickoff 2023. You can get 1 year of Gamecock Scoop Premium for 60% off. That's only going to run through Monday, so make sure you take advantage of that if you're listening to that before the 27th or 28th or whatever Monday is. And we'll be back next Thursday to talk North Carolina. We're going to talk a little bit about the back half of the schedule, anything else that happens in the meantime. Until then, this has been the GamecockScoop.com podcast. We will see you later.